Everything costs something. This is opportunity cost.
Officially recording. We are good. All right. So Matt, we talked a little bit. We're all heated up for anyone listening to this.
We've already had the best conversation.
Yeah. We were like letting it rip before, but it's good. That means the room is already warm. I want to start with you just introducing yourself and describing who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into kind of how we know each other and see where it takes us.
Okay. Yeah, jump in and guide me along anywhere you want me to go. My name is Matt Gibbons. I am a physical therapist and the owner of Physical Therapy and Balance in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I've owned Fyzical since 2018. I came there previously. I founded and started Next Level Physical Therapy and the Next Level Sport Performance Center. But as things will happen in business, they partnered up with a large local medical organization, and I needed to make a change, make a move. And I found the franchise Fyzical, so it was a good fit for me because it took that I could still do all the things I currently did as an orthopedic physical therapist and treating sports or treating back injury, treating all the different things I do. But I was able to open up to the larger community and offer other services. And the main thing, it's right in the name, it's Physical Therapy and Balance, is they have a very unique and patented balance system or paradigm, they call it. So there's a lot of people out there with balance issues, with vestibular issues, dizziness. It's kind of an unseen, untalked about community, but I thought this is something I can do to help a lot more people. So that's how I decided to go with Fyzical. I like the franchise model. And so I bought that. I opened up in the current location in December of 2019, which was not the greatest business move at the time, but I, of course, couldn't know that 3 months later, the whole world was going to shut down.
Yeah, I always look at it like if you survive those moves, then the good times really roar.
Yeah.
I had a conversation, this is off topic, but it just made me think of it. I had a conversation with a guy who was an executive at Compass Realty this was last year. I don't know if you know anything about Compass, but they're a large publicly traded realty group that's all over the country. And they had been roaring right before COVID, and they IPO'd in, I think it was like January or February of 2020. And after the IPO, their stock was basically like straight down in a straight line. It was a total failure to launch, but not because the business wasn't good, just because of like what the macro was doing. Since then, it's recovered like insanely. And I remember when I was talking to him, we were talking about how if in a way for like the employees and the shareholders, it obviously you want the price to go up, but sometimes what happens with IPOs is their IPO, it'll go well, and then people will kind of sell off and go on cruise control mode. Sure. But if you have to earn it back, now it's like they're getting the fire inside the business to keep it going. So anyway, it just made me think of it. But sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. A lot of businesses didn't come back after that. And even though I had been established as a physical therapist and owner prior to that, it was like I was starting completely over because I had a new name, new location, kind of a new model. And that first summer, because I couldn't go out and market and nobody was going out. I couldn't go in doctor's office. I couldn't go, there was no community events to go market at, nothing. And there were a couple of weeks there during that summer where like my total client load for the week was like 6 visits or 8 visits. And of course they gave us, PPP loans and took out a large EIDL loan, and I got through. But it's been a long climb and scrapping to get back because I wasn't on firm ground when I started. But we've made it. We're out. We're on the other side of it, and so that's good. We're still standing here. So I think through it, you learn a lot of lessons. Went through some employees, a lot of things about still learning a lot about marketing. Marketing is a tough one to figure out because it changes. But just tons of things. So yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about client acquisition and marketing in your space? Are most of the clients people who've suffered injuries? Is it people doing preventative care? A little bit of both? How does that typically go? Like, do you have an ideal client in mind?
Yeah, so the vast majority are people that have been injured and are coming into us. We have a few that come more as a preventative type thing. insurance in our great healthcare system, insurance doesn't usually pay much for preventative type things. But like for us, the ideal client, it's kind of funny because it's almost like two different physical therapy clinics in one sense. And that is it. When I got into the balance portion of it, I took the courses and I learned enough to be dangerous with the balance, but I realized I've got 20 years in orthopedics and this is my world. So I hired someone and put them through all the training and stuff, and they became vestibular certified and stuff like that. So I have an extremely well-trained professional therapist that specializes in balance stuff. So as a clinic, what we market to, because it's hard to kind of serve two masters. So our primary marketing and our ideal client, if you will, is Mary, and she's 65 years old, and she, has a husband and lives in the Brookfield area, and like we've gone through that thing. But it's really as someone who's maybe had some balance challenges or back pain or something like that, but at that age, because that's where we're at with baby boomers and everything else. Like we can really help that population. But at the same time, my background being ortho, I still get families that have known me for years, and they still have athletes and families. So I get a lot of high school athletes, some collegiate athletes, but just the, everyday industrial athlete, people who, hurt something at work or on the weekends when they're playing with their kids or whatever, shoulders, back, whatever. So I don't know if there's really just one thing. We have what we market to because we specialize in the balance and stuff like that. But even that kind of changes, because we'll talk, I think, a little bit later maybe about some of the technology that we've adopted and things. And so we're seeing a change in what we can do and who we can help. So that's it. But as far as acquiring them, I think you were kind of asking, how do we do that and market? So we live in an area that's very heavily driven by, large health organizations. You got Freighter, you got Pro Health, Aurora, Ascension, all these different ones. And they're wound pretty tight as far as with their referrals out.
Sure.
They don't like to do that. So I don't have much success going out individually. And even finding, there are private orthopedics and other doctors out there. And even finding those, my favorite orthopedic group, I won't name just because I don't want to, give one group over another.
No free ads.
No free ads. But these guys are great. But they themselves, even though they're private, they have an ownership interest in 3 different physical therapy clinics of their own. So they're not going to send to me unless they don't have a clinic right next to me. So if they have a client that comes to them from my area, they'll say, go see Matt. But I don't get a ton that way. So mostly our marketing comes from direct marketing to the client. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole new thing to get to. So through community events and stuff, we do, Google ads, Facebook ads, and posts, social media, but just a ton of word of mouth. And then of course, you build up a clientele over time, and I probably have, I don't know, maybe 1,200 people and emails and stuff. So then, you do email marketing to them and kind of reminders of hey, if you have back pain, or maybe somebody in your family or something like that. But so that's kind of the approach we take different ways.
Yeah. And it becomes reputation based basically, which is that's kind of one of my favorite types of businesses, because it's super similar to what I do in the sense that we're, effectively when a client's working with me, it's a 2-person team, effectively myself and my processor. And we're not this huge entity the way that a bank would be, or a big, even a larger mortgage company. And so it's funny. I think some people look at that as a negative. I always look at it as a positive from a client's perspective, because same thing with you guys, anything you do, it's your personal name on.
Yeah.
And I tell people a lot, on top of just business ethics and wanting a good outcome for you, my personal name is attached to this. So it's not no one knows my business. They know me. And that, it's a similar thing for you guys, which I think is a better value proposition for clients just in general. And we were talking about incentive alignment before. That to me is an aligned incentive between the person receiving the service or product and the person who's offering it. One thing I wanted to touch on is, so Matt had mentioned that they're kind of pseudo, ideal customer profile that they talk about as maybe somebody older who's working on the balance. That's things from an injury. Mm-hmm. But what Matt did not mention is how we know each other. And I think I've mentioned this on this podcast before, but I played lacrosse in college and had a catastrophic knee injury. I don't know what else to call it.
That would be accurate.
Yeah. So I was going to school in New York at the time, and long story short, I dislocated my femur from my tibia, which is typically accomplished through multiple ligament tears. If I remember correctly, and this would have been in 2015, I had tore my LCL, PCL, ACL, meniscus, and I think the IT band too, possibly.
Yeah, at least part of it was torn.
Yeah.
I don't think it was completely torn off, but
I think it was part of it. It was damaged or something.
Damaged.
And so I had a extensive list of surgeries that I overwent over that next basically 12 months. But also at that time, I moved back to Wisconsin to do my physical therapy with Matt. And we spent how long together?
I mean, you were coming to see me 5 days a week, I believe, for
almost a year.
Yeah, I mean, you came back in like February, right? Because didn't you do the injury in January?
Yeah, so the injury I think was like January. I want to say it was like January 15th or 16th or something. And I think by February 1st, I was back by you. Yeah.
So you came in, your knee was this big and not that big a guy, and didn't have any range of motion. But yeah, we worked together consistently through the summer.
Yeah.
And then at the end of summer, because you did go back to school that fall.
I went back to school that fall. Yeah. And then when I came back on breaks, but there was basically a 9-month window or so where I was in there with Matt every single day, multiple hours a day, trying to PT this thing. And we did it.
Hey, they told you that you were never going to run again.
Yeah, they did. And I did. And there's actually, I made a YouTube video about this. You guys listening to this want to look that up. But I got to see Matt's work firsthand. So I highly, highly can recommend it and co-sign it. But through that experience, I gained a really huge value for physical therapy and what it can offer you. Because, I mean, like you said, even just going from surgery to being able to walk again with a cane, I remember that was like a huge step.
Yeah.
And the range of motion, the flexibility, getting the strength back. I mean, seeing firsthand how long and how much work that took, it really highlights like how valuable what you guys do is.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
But second, I just wanted to highlight that for anybody listening because it was really a wild experience. And Matt made me cry one time, which is a tough task. I'm not a big crier. I didn't even cry when I got injured.
Yeah.
Actually, people were freaked out. I think I was in shock so bad that I couldn't. But I did cry in PT one time.
Well, I'm not a believer, that the whole no pain, no gain. I'm generally not a believer in that. So don't, not come to my clinic because you think I'm going to inflict pain.
Yeah, sorry. Matt will not inherently make you cry. Yeah.
But there are certain times and certain procedures and certain things that you just got to push it. And it was a catastrophic event, and his knee was in really bad shape. And he was a great client because he was willing to do whatever I asked and push it. And I said, sometimes this would be hard. It was, well, I want to say it was harder on me than him, but that's probably not true.
I think there's some times where it was. What I remember is, so the big thing for people who aren't super well versed in knee injuries is once you have orthopedic surgery, it's getting range of motion like heel to butt, like bending your knee. And what was it, getting to like 90 degrees and then 120 is kind of considered full range at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like a healthy young person is going to be able to bend their knee 140, 150 degrees. But like after any orthopedic surgery, if you're just looking for basic function, go up and downstairs, being able to squat. So yeah, 120 degrees is kind of the big get to that. And then anything after that is, bonus.
Yeah, I remember that was the goal. And for a while, it took forever to get to 90. But then we were stuck at 90, I think, for like weeks and weeks. Yeah. And so I went in for what's called a knee manipulation, which is basically where you go see an orthopedic surgeon. They put you out and they basically just bend your knee while you're out because your muscles aren't there to fight back. And I remember that they had put me out, did the manipulation, took a picture of my heel touching my butt. And then after that, it was like, well, it can get there. So it's not the knee that's the problem. It's like breaking up all the scar tissue and like, I guess, reworking the muscles.
Well, it's the inhibition from the brain.
Oh, is that really what it is?
Yeah, because your muscles wouldn't relax and guard. I mean, there's certainly scar tissue and things like that, but your body fighting against that.
And it was fighting. It was not easy. But no, I just wanted to highlight that really quick because that's how we met.
And it didn't bother me that much, that you cried a little bit. But it was a lot tougher on me.
The more he's gotten to know me, the more he's okay with it.
when your mom was in there, and I just several times hugged your mom, and
Yeah. No, it's tough. I was young at the time too. For everyone listening, I was only 19, I think. So just a kid out of school or in college rather.
Yeah. But it was also a good example, like what you're saying, like, because in your business, you talk with people a lot about what are their goals, right? And goal setting and things like that, not just in your, years for your business, but people who you're helping. And it showed the importance of goals.
Yeah.
Like you had the ultimate goal, like we got to get you back to 120 and stuff. But we had like daily is like the goal became every day we had to go at least 1 degree more. It's like 1 degree. There's a certain amount of error in measurement.
Yeah.
Okay. You're using this goniometer. It's like, well, is it 113 or 114 or whatever? But the goal being that you had to at least get or attempt to get 1 more degree every day and not slide backwards was important because it showed you each day that something was going on and that we were making, and we didn't let it backslide. So it was quite a...
Yeah, I think that's huge. Well, I think that's part of your job that a lot of people probably don't think about is like you said, a big reason of the knee not bending was actually my brain, not even just the muscle, like the actual injury itself. And so like the mental and emotional part of dealing with sounds like a negative connotation, just like working with clients, like managing that is its own skill set beyond the ability to understand the actual like medical portion of it. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective, but it's totally true. And I run into that too, where like when I'm working with a client, typically it's the most expensive thing they've ever bought. Typically it's a high stress, high pressure environment. And so managing the emotions is sometimes as challenging and valuable as the actual math, which in your case, it's the health stuff.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to touch on this though was... Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, we might table for right now. We're going to come back to this whole pain thing, I think, and talk about it a lot more in detail. But so keep that on there because I don't want to disrupt what we're flowing.
No, it's okay. Yeah, table that really quick. The only other thing I wanted to mention with regard to the goal setting is I believed that I was going to play again. Now, what's funny is knowing what I know now, I don't think the coaching staff, I know that they didn't. I know that basically the adults in the room at the time, which of course being 19 college athlete, I was like, I am the adult in the room, but I was not in hindsight. But the importance of having like those adults in the room or whatever like piece of authority that is kind of like helping me shape the mental motivation of thinking I was going to make it back is why I was able to get as far as I was. I mean, today I still have nerve damage. Like my foot's still not, I didn't even mention that. My foot was like half paralyzed effectively.
Still significant foot drop.
Yeah. And I still do to some degree. It's not enough. Like I don't wear an AFO anymore, and people who don't know me don't ever notice. It's only once I point it out that they're like, oh yeah, your gait's kind of weird and blah, blah, blah. But had I not believed that I was going to make it all the way back and felt like the people around me also believed that, I don't think it would have gotten as far as it even did, which like I cannot oversell how great you guys handled that. And like, especially looking back on it, I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Well, and don't underestimate the learning experience from the physical therapist side either, because that was, trying to remember, I had one other client with an extremely traumatic, had fallen out of a tree onto a sidewalk when they were trimming a tree at work and smashed their knee up. Traumatic injury there, but even that wasn't as bad. I don't remember if that was first or not. I think that one might have been first, but this was probably the worst athletic injury I'd ever treated. And
my doctor had said the same. He'd done 2 others, I think he said, that were similar, but they were motorcycle accidents. Yeah. They weren't sport injuries.
Yeah.
Freak accident.
So it probably helped form a little bit of the therapist I am today. And because I never ever told you couldn't do anything or wouldn't. And I said, yeah, we're going to do it, And I truly believed that we could get you back to where you could run and, at least jog and stuff. Whether you could play the sport, probably not at the level you wanted to or were at.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was trying to do it at the Division I level, which what ends up happening is you get to a point where even if you're 80%, even if you're 90% as good as you were, someone else is 100%.
Yeah.
And probably multiple someone else are 100%. And so it gets to this point where like it's it's a higher liability for the organization to have you potentially re-injure yourself than it is a payoff to have you. And I wasn't a starter anyway, so it's like it's just the trade-off wasn't worth it. But yeah, it is amazing though. Like when I look back at how what that transition and like process looked like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and so to the point there, I think it's good whether you're a physical therapist, a parent, a teacher, anything that you're working with somebody else who has goals, and even if they seem like they might be unrealistic goals to you, if your job is to help them do the best they can, then you should never squash that desire and stuff.
Yeah.
You just keep working towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll probably become a time that one of you will realize, either the therapist or the teacher will realize, like, you know what, he really can do this. Or the other person at some point says, you know, maybe that's not going to happen. I need to reset my goals. But I have since then in my practice tried to be the therapist that never says we can't do anything to a client. If they have the desire to do it. I have a 75-year-old woman who has some significant hip issues due to a muscle loss in her hip due to a surgery, and yet she runs marathons. She runs a walker. And she has walked out of doctor's offices. She's had several injuries over the year that any runner might have. And then when she goes to the doctor and says, well, my knee is bothering, and they like, well, why are you running marathons? You have a walker, you know? She'll walk out of their office because they're telling her she can't do something she loves and that she believes she can do.
She had knee replacement, or are they still like totally biological?
It's a hip replacement.
Okay.
And in the hip replacement, something happened after the surgery. And
got it.
Once again.
That's wild.
So she can walk without it stuff, but if she gets tipped off to one side, she can't recover because she can't abduct her hip to reach out.
Sure.
But she comes to me because she knows that I will not tell her it's time to stop running marathons or it's time to start running half marathons or anything else, as long as she can do it. I think there probably comes a time when that belief could become unhealthy for someone if they're starting to do things to try and get there that are not healthy, you know, unneeded surgeries or something else. Then there's a time to talk about it from a mental health standpoint. But just that somebody wants to do something and other people think, well, you can't do that. Well, but they're the people sitting on the couch.
Yeah. Or yeah, like whose job is it to determine that, right?
I always try and encourage people, you know, I had a guy that came to me with an injury, and he's a runner, and he's 86 years old. And still at 86 runs marathons. And I'm like, oh, wow, you must have been running marathons for a long time because, you know, you're in good shape. And most people, he's like, well, I started when I was 80. Now, he'd been a biker his whole life.
There's still time.
Like there's still time he had biked to work every day, like 20 miles. Mm-hmm. And so his legs were in extremely good shape. His joints were in good shape. And his daughter was a phenomenal athlete who had an injury. And then on her recovery, he started walking with her. And then when she started running, he started jogging with her. She said, Dad, you should do. And so she bought for his 80th birthday, his first entry into a marathon. And he did it, and he loved it. So
that's wild.
You know, so there's a lot of amazing people out there with amazing stories, just the will, human spirit that keeps them going. And so I'm not here to say you can't do it. I like, well, what can we do? And, you know, things that I learned from you, Bo, then, you know, like you researched a better orthotic to help with your foot drop.
Oh, yeah. I have a funny story about this.
You know that I reached out to you like 3 months ago and said, hey, what was that? Because even though I don't sell those types of devices and stuff like that, I try in my clinic to look at all aspects of what's going on with the person and help them out in any way. I want to go above and beyond. I want them to know that I'm trying for them in any way, even the simplest. And she was frustrated with the orthotics she'd been given. The orthotic people weren't giving her any option stuff. I said, well, try this. You know?
Yeah. Did she end up trying it? Yeah.
I think she did.
Okay.
You know, she wasn't on my on my client list. She's seen my other therapist. And she did change, and I don't know if that's one, but in the process, you know, she found something.
Yeah, I found one that works. Yeah. I know we just said no free ads, but I will actually give a free ad to this one company. It's called Turbo Med Orthotics, and they make the ankle foot orthotic that we're referring to. So again, for people listening that don't know what that is, basically it's a like brace type of device that most of them, it's meant for people with drop foot. So it's meant for people that cannot independently lift their foot. They can only press down, but because of nerve damage or something, like some people get it from like pinched nerves and back injuries and things like this, they can't independently lift their own foot. And so the device basically lifts your foot for you so that when you walk, you can have a normal gait and swing your foot through. Most of them are designed to go inside of your shoe. They're extremely uncomfortable. They're extremely rigid. This company, which I believe was started by like a single guy in Canada, at the time when I bought it, it was directly from him. Yeah. He was producing them like at his house. He made this device that I think was now bought out by a larger company, whatever, but it fits on the outside of your shoe and it's incredibly comfortable and it's amazing. Like it works so well. So I always recommend this to people. The funny story I have for you is right around the time that you had messaged me, my physical therapist I had worked with, because I was going to Cornell at the time, and when I was at school, I had a therapist named Zach out there and another one named Jim. Jim, rest in peace. Jim was awesome. He actually passed away not that long ago. But he had reached out to me, not Jim, Zach had reached out to me recently saying, hey, I'm the trainer at Lehigh University now. I have a football player who had a similar injury to yours, also has drop foot, and we're having a lot of trouble with the AFOs. Yeah. And so we were just talking about it again. And if we go way, way back to just a little sidebar to that, I'd also had an experimental nerve decompression surgery, which I flew to Houston for. And I think at the time I was only like the 7th or 8th person to ever have it. And there was like one doctor who was able to do it. Yeah, I remember. Well, this guy from Lehigh ended up going down recently and having that same surgery. So I'm actually waiting to hear back. I need to follow up to see if it works. But when I was going through it, I was like scouring the internet to try to find somebody with experience with this. And I came across, I don't know if you remember this or not, but this guy named Blaine Irvey, who had played football at the University of Texas, who like 5 years ahead of me had a similar injury. And I ended up reaching out to him, getting in touch with him. And now it's like this weird full circle thing where I'd reach out to him. He kind of helped me through it. And now similar thing with this other football player who's now at Lehigh. And it's I don't know, it was a weird like roundabout moment that's just like, one, it made me feel old because I was like, I can't believe that was almost 10 years ago, or it was 10 years ago. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. But anyway, that was a sidebar, but I just was thinking about it. Something I want to jump into, we kind of alluded to it before, was the technology that you guys work with. So my understanding is there is tech that you have access to and are trained on and your team is trained on that you will not find at most other physical therapy places or businesses. Well, I want to hear all about it.
Okay. Yeah, that is true. So I don't see myself as a gadget guy. I don't like to just pick up all different things. I do look for emerging technologies that are actually useful and have some research behind them and so forth. And one of those is the class 4 laser I had to use with you, deep tissue laser. Nobody knew what those were, and I didn't know what it was, but I've had that thing now for like 9 years, and a lot of people now have them or are familiar with them, but I was ahead of the curve there, and it made sense and so forth. And then there was nothing else that really caught my eye until I was at a conference for my franchise Physicals, their big annual conference, and then went to that, and the vendors were there, and just kind of like a lot of little things led me to deciding that this was the right thing to try. First, it was a buddy of mine who's an owner of a physical down in Chicago, kept asking me hey, have you been to the New Fit booth? Have you gone and talked to the guys? I'm like, no, I never heard of them. They're like, you got to go over there. Well, every time I went by the booth during the conference, there were several people there, and I do not like to stand in line, so I just kind of move on, thinking I'll get back to them later. The last day of the show, he said, did you go talk to them? I said, no. He goes, well, you should before they close down. So I walk over there. The place is closing down, and there's just one person standing there in front of me. And so I start talking with them, and he puts it on my shoulder, and it's called the Newbie, a neurobioelectric stimulator. And it uses electrical stimulation. He puts it on my shoulder and starts doing this, and he's talking, and I don't know what he's saying. I mean, I'm really probably not tuned in enough to figure this out. And in my mind, I'm like, this is some glorified TENS unit, which anybody can get a TENS unit, and it's been around forever and so forth. And he's trying to tell me how it's different, and I'm probably just burned out from the conference, not picking up on it. And then the gal sitting behind the desk there looks at my name tag and says, are you from Waukesha? And I said, yeah. She said, are you familiar with the MS clinic? I said, well, I know of it. I said, I've not been there. I said, I tried to reach out when I first started up, and then there was COVID. And so I said, never really got back to connecting with them. She said, well, you really should. Like, if you bought one of these machines, you'd have 20 new clients in a month. I'm like, well, now as a business owner, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get 20 new clients to tell me more about this. And the developer of this had written a book called The New Fit Method, and the book was there. I said, we talked a little bit, and then I said, can I take this book? She said, yeah. So I read most of it on the way home. I was just completely enthralled with it. And it's like, this is all new to me. Got home. I called the owner of the MS gym, got his take on it because they actually had a unit there that somebody donated and told me how it was helping people with MS and so forth. He says, we see good results with these. He said, the problem is I have all these people. This gym is run completely by volunteers. So we have all these MS clients come for a couple of hours on Wednesday and Friday mornings, and there's a line for the newbie, and they don't get a good treatment session, and so they get results, but they could do so much better if they were actually being treated by a therapist that knew how to use it and more consistently. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I reached out to another physical franchise owner that I knew that had one, and had a long conversation. But in the end, basically, she said, let me put it this way. And she's kind of become a technology gadget person. She has the newbie and shockwave and the laser and pelvic floor stimulator and all these different things. She goes, if I had to start my practice over with just one thing, it would be the newbie.
Really? Interesting.
And she explained why. So I'm like, okay, I'm kind of hooked now. So I figure out how to make this deal happen and so forth, and then the training. So what it is. So, and why is it different? Because yes, there's a lot of electrical stimulation units out there, and TENS is the most common, and you can buy that on Amazon for $100. So why did I pay close to $20,000 for this? Well, the difference is that every other electrical stimulation unit that's out there on the market uses alternating current. Okay. Our bodies are wired, and we're use direct current. You get a direct current signal from your brain going out to your foot to twitch it. That's how you move and walk. And then going back, we have receptors all over our body that are giving input directly to the brain through direct current. We don't have this alternating current going back and forth. So with alternating current, if you put an electrode on your bicep here and here and turn it up, it would just be zipping a current back and forth. But it would fire the motor neurons in there and cause a contraction. Your arm would come up. With alternating current, you literally could not straighten out through that. You've heard people talk about they've gotten electrocuted, and if they grab the wire, they can't let go.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
That's why?
Okay. Yeah. Because it's all happening locally. You're not getting an input. It's short-circuited the input to your brain. It's just causing these muscles to contract, and nothing can undo that. Well,
it sounds scary when you put it that way.
Yeah. With direct current, and we've used that for years. And so what does TENS do? Well, number one thing, because it produces this, what we call a noxious stimuli, and nerves can only transmit one signal at a time, it can overcome, if you're having pain, the pain signal. And so you just feel this vibration and electrical stimulation. And so for a short period of time, it can relieve pain because it blocks that. You don't feel it for a while. And even after you take it off, maybe for 30 minutes, maybe for an hour or two, it might be a while before the pain comes back, but you didn't do anything to help it or to do any neuromuscular re-education. So at some point, the pain will come back.
It's funny that you say that because as you were talking, I was thinking about how we used to use the stim on like my quad, hamstring and stuff. And I realized that I didn't really ever ask what it was that we were doing. Like what was it supposed to be accomplishing? I just remember being like, for myself, being like, oh, the muscle's moving. This must be good. But that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting because knowing what I know now, it's like 20 years into my career, it's like I took a whole new neuroscience course.
Yeah.
And understand things completely different. It's completely changed the way I treat, even in absence of this technology, just because of what I know now. But we were taught in school that TENS and using Russian stim and these different things was neuromuscular re-education. But I realize now that it really wasn't. I think because like after the surgery and the swelling and everything, getting the muscle going and getting the muscle pump, there might be a little re-education there or something that stimulates and stuff. Or maybe it's just that it lets you know that you can move it now. I'm not really sure because it's not really communicating with the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But with the...
because it's between two paths talking. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. As opposed to direct. I see. Okay.
Yeah. So with direct current, I can do the same thing. I can put 2 electrodes on my bicep, my quad, whatever, and turn it up until it contracts. But I can use very little effort, and I can straighten right out to it and get rid of the spasm that's going on. And so that is a game changer.
Yeah. Can you talk about the ways can you talk about the ways that you're applying it in practice? Like who's using these for what type of injuries or what type of,
Yeah. So let me kind of just jump to it. I said we're going to talk about this pain thing.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a good time to like dive in there, and then I'll talk about all these different things that we're doing with it. So when you hurt your knee, your knee hurt, and we would have said, that pain is locally generated, it hurts because of all this damage there. And that's true that's where the damage is, but the pain isn't generated in your knee. The pain comes from your brain. So now we joke all the time about when people say, well, so then it's in my head. Well, like really it is, and that's because we have control of it there, you can do a lot with that information. So all of your body, you have receptors. You got baroreceptors that do pressure. You got GTO, Golgi tendon organs we call GTOs, and muscle spindles. They register the force put on a muscle and the length of tendon muscles and stuff like that. You got receptors that do temperature, like I said, blood pressure, all these different things, inflammation, all these different things across your body, all the ones for your internal organs, constantly feeding information to your brain. And all that goes into your lower brain, what we call your prehistoric or your crocodile brain. And that does all bodily functions. Then your upper brain does executive functions, right? So that part of the brain literally gets over 10 million signals, inputs per second.
Holy cow.
So it's just constantly monitoring things all over your body, every movement, every, temperature, all these things. And the most important in this context of those is probably what we call proprioception. Proprioception is the body's ability to know where it's at in space at all times, kind of. So I always tell people, it's like if you woke up in a completely blacked out room so you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face, you wouldn't have to move your arm or your leg or feel it to know, is it straight or is it bent?
Is this is unique to humans, right? That we're aware of? Am I wrong about that? For some reason, I thought that we had some type of ability to like know what's happening in our body without like other sensory inputs. Maybe I'm making this up. I don't know. Anyway, keep going.
Well, I would think all animals have to have this ability.
Okay.
Because it feeds right into balance. Your balance is made up of your vision, your inner ear, and then proprioception. So if you close your eyes, you're probably going to be less stable. It's taking that outside input of what's going on. You can tell if you start to fall. Your inner ear, is your vestibular and gives, dizziness and stuff. And then proprioception is, you can feel where your joints are and stuff. And if you step on something, even though you didn't see it, but it's angled, it's angled because you can feel it. So proprioception becomes very important in the pain world because all these inputs you get. So now you've injured your knee and you have inflammation. You got all these things going on. You got things that are ruptured, and that brain is getting all these signals, and the brain has to make a decision. Is this a threat or not? Okay. And based on how much, a lot of different things, if it thinks it's a threat, it's got to do something about that. And the things it can produce to address that are pain, muscle inhibition, or guarding. So muscle tightening. Okay. So we talk about a threat bucket in the brain. So those things are going into the threat bucket, but then there's other things. Are you stressed out at work? Is there a problem in your relationship at home? Are you sick? Is there inflammation in your body? All those things go into the threat bucket. And at a certain point, it's got to do something about it. And that's why sometimes, even if you didn't re-injure your knee, some days you might wake up and it's aching. And it's like, why? It wasn't hurting yesterday. It didn't do anything. Well, that's a known pathway for your brain, and it has to have an escape from the stress you're feeling and the threats. So it shoots down the common pathways.
So my brain is literally like synthetically creating the pain because it's trying to release, like you were saying, stress from, wow, that's really wild. Yeah. I always assume it's because of the weather, because somebody told me one time that like your joints can feel the weather pressure, but this makes way more sense.
Yeah. Well, I think the weather I think that's true. I think for some people that can affect, maybe it's inflammation or pressure or other things in there. I don't know the mechanism of that. But even with that, it's changing something, and then the brain sees it and says, well, there's a threat of some sort.
Yeah, well, it's basically like the real pain created a pathway that the brain now recognizes as an available pathway, basically, and so it tends to use it more than other pathways.
Yep.
That's really crazy.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, it's not totally related, but my wife and I talk a lot about and have explored different concepts of like generational cellular trauma, which is like this idea that if your parents experience some type of like trauma that manifests physically in their body, and then they're passing that on genetically to you, that there's allegedly science to suggest that you are actually picking up some of that trauma on a cellular level because their cells had it.
That's crazy. But I've heard that before, but
I don't know how true it is, but it's, I guess, knowing what you know to definitely be true, it kind of makes me feel like it could be, because like the brain's just really, I mean, it's kind of like you've heard all the stories about people who have illnesses, but then they find out it's actually like a mental health challenge that's basically causing the illness, because your brain can convince itself that it's sick or whatever.
It controls all these different things. So, but the threat level and understanding that is huge, because like, if you, think about our warriors, our military, and unfortunately, they're put in harm's way a lot. Somebody gets shot in a firefight, but yet they push through and they run to save a comrade or something, another soldier, Marine, whatever. And they don't even like sense or know their pain, even though their foot's just about blown off or something.
Yeah.
Because the bigger threat at that moment is whoever's shooting at them. And so, like you say in prehistoric times, the tiger is the bigger threat. So you're going to run across hot coals or whatever. But later you'll feel it or whatever. So, which
I know people always attribute to adrenaline, but ultimately adrenaline is just a chemical changing the balance within the brain, right? So it's, it's not local to the place of the injury.
Yeah. So it's a systemic thing, and it can feed into that, and it can maybe, subdue some of those things or excite other parts of the brain, and then you're going to be able to do things. So how this works then is, because we know that that's kind of proprioception is what I said before. It's like, so one of the things that decreases the threat to the brain is the ability to see with the body or know where it's at. So when we can increase joint motion and things like that, we decrease the threat, because the body feels safer. So take this into account. Like what we're saying is, you have an area, let's say the back is a good one. A lot of people come with back pain. And I had a woman come in, is in tears. She'd been working out, strained her back. I don't know if I should tell you, it was actually my wife.
Oh, okay.
She called from,
this woman woman came in.
Well, I wasn't going to say who it was. And then I'm like, well, what's the heck? It doesn't matter.
I feel like this one's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's not going to divorce me over this.
I also know Bat's wife. She's lovely, just for the record.
Thank you. So, and she loves you. So she calls. She's coming from her gym saying, I strained my back, I'm going to do it. She gets in the parking lot. She calls because she's in tears and she can't walk from her car into the clinic by herself. So I go out and help her in, and she can't stand up straight. So I put the electrodes on and I turn up the signal and I work her through the process and stuff. And within 20 minutes, she can stand without pain. And usually prior to this, I could work somebody through that, but it might take 2 or 3 sessions or at least an hour, and I'm doing different things and stuff. But basically what happens is putting that signal on there and then getting the person to do small movements is training the brain to say, hey, you locked this down because you thought something was going on here that you thought was a big threat. But it's really not that big a threat. It's just that you're trying to protect the person from themselves. And by stimulating it and then saying, okay, we're going to do a small motion and then just keep increasing motion, we're showing the brain that, hey, you know what? It's okay. We've blocked the pain and you can move this and you don't have to send out this big pain signal. And that's how we do the neuromuscular reeducation, and with respect to pain.
So is it redirecting the pain signal somewhere else, or it's actually stopping it from releasing this system? Okay.
Because it sees the threat as less, so it doesn't have to redirect or anything. It just says, I don't,
That's so interesting.
So you wanted some, I feel like probably missed a whole bunch of things in the neuroscience of pain talk here, but Some examples
Yeah.
of what we're doing there. So that would be one with back pain, works great. Then I had a woman that came to me. She had had a fall. She was hiking out in Colorado. The backpack on, she slipped, fell backwards, and posteriorly dislocated her shoulder, which is extremely difficult to do. And usually very, kind of like with your knee, very traumatic.
What does that mean posteriorly?
So the joint right here, most times when people dislocate their shoulder, it comes out forward.
Okay. Yeah, like I'm thinking
because
of, like,
you have,
when I see
you have more
football players do
bone and
this
stuff on the
like,
back that stops you. So to posteriorly dislocate means that it came out of joint and went backward.
oh, okay.
And that usually does a lot of damage. So she goes to the emergency room. They put her in a sling. They said, you're going to need surgery, but go home and go see an orthopedic there. She doesn't know whether they didn't emphasize enough or whether she was groggy from medication or whatever, that this was something that had a time restraint on it. So she came home. She got an appointment with orthopedic. She goes in 3 weeks later. He looked at it, does the x-ray stuff. He's like, yeah, you need surgery, but you needed surgery 3 weeks ago. You've lost 40% of your humeral head. 40% of that bone is gone. So I don't know because I didn't see reports or anything. I assume that she probably tore the artery and the blood supply to it probably had failed, and then it's just becoming necrotic and dying off. So they did a replacement, a partial replacement. They replaced the humeral head with a prosthetic, and it was a failed surgery. She couldn't move it. It was in pain all the time. Then they realized that they put in too large of an orthotic or prosthetic and destroyed the rest of her joint. Then she had a complete shoulder replacement.
This might be a stupid question, but are those made to measure? I would assume that they are, but maybe
there's different sizes.
Okay.
And
I don't know why I envisioned this like 3D printed laser measured thing, but I guess it's not, it sounds like.
No, in the surgery, they'll have like several different sizes there based on the person's size and weight, different things.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
And then they try and fit them together. But for whatever reason, she got one that didn't fit right, destroyed the rest of the shoulder, had a second surgery, had at least 2 other surgeries for manipulation and stuff over a 4-year period. She did this in 2021. So she comes to me this past January, February, 4 years later, and she tells me that she has been in chronic pain on an average of 5 out of 10 every day since the initial injury. Nothing's ever taken her pain away, and she's never gotten her range of motion back. She can go, like 70 degrees here. It's just awful. And she's a young mom, she has three kids at home. At the time when this happened, her newest was just a few months old. So, and she's got to try to pick up a baby and all this stuff. So after 2 treatments with the newbie, putting it on, having her go through motion stuff, she comes back, she says, my pain is gone. I'm like, what do you mean it's decreased or it was gone for a while? She's like, I think it's just about gone. And after 3 treatments, she goes back, she's like, yeah, she goes, I don't have any pain. And I continue to treat her to try and regain motion. It's like completely atrophied. She has very little muscle. Her pain has never come back.
Has the motion come back?
Huh?
Has the motion come back?
No.
Oh, okay.
A little bit, but
But still, the pain.
We're not giving the
pain is the quality of life part.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, it's both, but that's the bigger hurdle.
Yeah. She said if nothing else happens, like she's got your mindset. She's convinced that somehow there's going to be a miracle or something, and she's working hard, hoping to someday to be able to raise her hand above her head and support.
Yeah.
But the fact that her pain is gone lets her live
a comfortable life, right? I mean,
and enjoy things and not always be miserable in pain. So that's huge.
Wow. And so is this something that you're continuing, like now that the pain's gone effectively, is she continuing to use this for treatment? Is it something you have to do?
We're using it for strengthening and stuff. We're not using it for pain controlling.
So is it pretty, I don't want to say like curative, because I don't think it's the right word, but when it takes care of something like this, is the idea that the brain's now established this and it's established. You're not having to remind it all the time, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Wow.
You've eliminated the threat output and stuff. I can't say that she won't ever have pain in the shoulder again or anything.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, she took off a couple of weeks, went on vacation and stuff. She didn't come back saying, man, I really need that. It's hurting again. It's all right. So that's
wild.
That's probably one of my craziest stories. The other thing that we're doing a lot with right now is neuropathy. So for those who don't know, neuropathy is basically a disease of the nerves, generally most common in people with diabetes. It's the most common. It's when blood sugar is uncontrolled, and that affects your blood vessels and affects the tiniest blood vessels the most, and those are in our distal extremities, so our fingers, toes, and feet and hands, so forth. So it's most common in diabetics to have foot neuropathy. And there's never been anything that they have found that treats it. The primary treatment mode when somebody comes with neuropathy is to give them some sort of drug, generally gabapentin, which is something that helps nerve pain, just to mask the pain. But it doesn't cure a thing, doesn't help anything. If they go off the gabapentin, pain comes right back, and sometimes it doesn't even help that much. But there's certainly side effects with these pharmaceuticals.
Is this where people end up with amputations through diabetes? That's why? Okay. Yeah, because I knew that was a thing, but I didn't really know why that was a thing.
Yeah, they'll lose sensation, and then after that, they might lose motion, ability to control and stuff as the nerves die off farther and farther and farther up. And the big thing is when you don't have sensation there, they could step on a nail and not even know it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then they have an open wound, and then they get, infected and stuff like that.
I could only imagine, even my foot the way it is now, the top of it, if you poke it with like a knife and your finger, I still can't really tell that one is sharper than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell that I'm being touched.
Yeah.
And it's weird because like certain spots feel different than other spots.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine, if you had no feeling at all, I mean, it's a tough thing to explain to people what that feels like. Like I remember before, it's funny because I don't look at myself as like disabled. I know I like definitionally, like technically am. I don't have the parking pass though, which I feel like is kind of,
I'm going to be there. You gotta go the pass.
I'm kind of getting chipped a little bit, but I think I could technically, but when I think about it, it's such this weird thing. And I remember I used to do this when we go into your office is I'd sit on the end of a table and just like stare at my foot and be like, move, and it just, your brain just like cannot tell it to move.
Yeah. And it never, for that first 8-9 months that we were seeing each other all the time, it never did.
No.
I remember you coming home from school and being super excited, said, Matt, you got to see this. And you came in my clinic, pull up your shoe, you're like, look, and you could just move your toe, just really move it.
Yeah.
And that was huge.
Well, what's funny is even today, I can move it much more now than I could. Like I can lift the foot a little bit and I still can't independently wiggle the toes, but I can get like a twitch, which was big. But yeah, it's so funny. I remember as it started to come back because nerves heal so slow, there was a point in time where I thought it was coming back, but this was myself in the PT at school. I remember him being like centimeters away from my foot being like, okay, try to do it and trying to figure out if it's twitching or not. And it's so goofy, but it is such a weird thing though. The brain injury, or not brain injury, but like the nerve injury, which is impacted by the brain. And the fact that this type of tech is now out there is, I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, and so I didn't even really finish it. So that's what neuropathy is. So the company that developed the NewFit, they did a study. They thought that this would help. They started treating some people with neuropathy. We're seeing some benefits. So they actually did a study. They took 150 people with diabetic peripheral neuropathy, split them in two groups of 75. One group got TENS because a lot of people think you can treat neuropathy with TENS. You can block the pain temporarily, and then it just comes back, and it doesn't do anything to change the nerve. And then the other 75 people were treated with the newbie, and they did a foot bath where they dropped the electrodes. We do the one thing your parents said, don't ever mix, is water and electricity. We do.
Oh, that's literally what we do.
So you put their feet in water, you put the negative leads in there, but the other leads, generally put them on the spinal cord right at the bottom of the back because we're trying to get the whole leg and the nerve going. And then we just turn it up to see what they can kind of tolerate, You do it for 20 minutes and you'll have them just move their toes as they're in there and little foot movements and stuff like that. But that's it. You do a 20-minute foot bath. So they did that twice a week for 6 weeks. They did baseline studies, of course, before and after. I mean, the, pain scale and sensation and stuff like that. But they also did EMG studies, which you can't fake. They do the little electrodes and put a current through there and they measure how fast the nerve conducts the signal, or if it can at all, and then the amplitude and stuff like that. And across the board, people improved in all categories, including nerve conduction velocity and nerve conduction amplitude.
Good.
So
basically
it's
how quick
doing
it's getting through,
yeah,
how much of it's getting
yeah.
through. Yeah.
So something's doing that's not just stopping pain or blocking it, but is actually healing the nerve because of improving the conductor velocity. And I don't know the physiology of that. I think I listened to a podcast that talked about this one time, and I think they were talking about that they believe it's forming some form of myelin, the sheath around the nerve that's been damaged, but it's not the same as the original myelin. So it's not necessarily ever going to be as good, but people don't care if they can feel.
Yeah, better than non-treated.
So we learned about that around the first of the years when I first knew that was a thing. And they actually published this study, is a legit study, was published in the Journal of Diabetes Research, February, first week of February.
I was going to say, this is kind of how we reconnected, because I remember you reached out to me and you were like, I got to talk to you about this thing. It's really crazy. I got to tell you about it.
Yeah.
It is wild.
Yeah, you need to come in and see what we can do with that foot still.
Yeah, I know. I'd love to try it. Well, this is a good segue too. I would love to try it on the foot, but we were also talking about other applications for it, such as heart rate variability, which Matt and I are both, no free ads, Oura Ring wearers.
Ring wearers, yes.
Yeah. And we were talking about heart rate variability. Can you just jump into that? Because I was really misunderstanding what that actually meant.
And just so you know, so we started the neuropathy thing, and so we've had people now probably 4 or 5 weeks in. We'd had some before that. The other thing that it works with, I want to put this out kind of as a public service announcement, is with the neuropathy is diabetics aren't the only ones. People who go through chemotherapy oftentimes get neuropathy. And same thing, they just give them drugs and stuff. We've had a couple of patients who have chemo that came in and had huge results. So if you know somebody's going through cancer treatments and they're complaining of neuropathy, send them our way because this will help them. Had probably quicker, better results than the diabetics. Now, if they're still undergoing chemo, then it's going to be kind of up and down until they're done with the treatment, but it will help them. And other people, and sometimes it's not diabetics. I have another client that had this he had a stroke 6 years ago, and the only residual thing from that was that he gets neuropathy in his feet, but it only comes on at night. Like he says, usually like after dinner, my feet start aching, and then throughout the night, and in the morning, they're usually okay. So after 2 or 3 visits, he said basically it's neuropathy. After the first or second visit, he said, I didn't have any at night until 3 a.m, and then when I woke up, it's like a 3 out of 10, where it's usually twice that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the funniest thing, and this guy is 70-something years old, very fit, works out all the time. He told me the last time he was in, he says, this newbie thing for the neuropathy is really working. He says, the other night I had my shoes off and I'm walking around barefoot. He says, I felt like my feet were 20 years old again. So that was a kind of a neat thing for him to say. So anyway, I just wanted to say that we are seeing results with that, and it's helping people.
Yeah, well, and we'll drop your contact info. It'll be in the bio of this video, so people will be to get in touch.
Great. So the other things it can do, heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is the variability between individual heartbeats. It's not like, hey, my base is 55 and I can get it up to 175. I like to explain it like if you're sitting at rest and you have a steady heartbeat of 60 beats per minute, so 1 every second, I think the common thought, and my thought before I learned about it, was that means that if I'm very healthy, every second, on the second, boom, 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 I'm having a heartbeat. But that's actually a sign of someone who's in distress. That's a very rigid type heartbeat, and it means you're probably in your sympathetic nervous system and your fight or flight system. It's not very healthy at all. You're super stressed body. What you want is to have a much greater heart rate variability than that. And when we say greater, we're talking milliseconds here. As the older you get, the lower your heart rate variability gets, but it's a good indicator of age. So then we were talking earlier, and we kind of came up with some numbers. I think somebody, in your age range, probably going to be, maybe 70 to 100 milliseconds would be the heart rate variability. For me, and I'm stressed, I'm oftentimes in the upper teens to, low 20s, but I should be more in the 30s and 40s. So
don't worry, we looked mine up too, and it was unhealthy. So turns out I got work to do in the stress department.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, that's what heart rate variability is, and it's an indicator of whether you're operating in your sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is the fight or flight when something happens. we want that ability to, it'll get more blood to the muscles and, helps the thought process and all this stuff to a certain extent. And so you can react to big threats. But you can't stay in that all the time. It's very unhealthy. It's hard on the heart. It's hard on a lot of things. So you want to get into your parasympathetic, which we call the rest and digest phase. But let's talk with the doctor, and he said, basically, since COVID, all the stress that we all went through, as a culture, as a society, we have not moved back into that more relaxed
That's
state.
funny you say that. This is something I think about a lot, and I wish there's some way to measure this, has the collective level of like stress and unease across the board just been raised? And if so, can that be undone, or is there just like a new equilibrium that's like inherently, higher amplitude?
I think it can be reversed to a certain extent, but it takes some individual effort. It takes effort on our nutrition, on our sleep cycles, on getting off devices, and then maybe something like what I'm talking about with the newbie, we'll talk about in just a second here, of how we do it. But that can help change it. So, and people are resistant to that type of stuff, like we are in a big Baja movement, right? Make America healthy again.
Yes.
Without getting political. I mean, I feel like with my clinic, I've tried to be that model, Baja, be healthier by doing things more natural and looking at all parts. When people come to me just for physical therapy, I'll talk to them about nutrition. I'll talk to them about their sleep. I'll talk to them about some of these other things because I want that in my clinic. I want it to be a full wellness, and that when you're done seeing me for whatever it is you came for, pain or whatever, then I'm still a resource for you for training and so forth. So I think there might be ways we can do that. But the problem is our society keeps speeding up.
Mm-hmm. And
it's that part of it's not slowing down. Everything's 24/7 news cycles, and everybody's always on the device, and that's not healthy and all that stuff. So what can we do? The newbie, there's something they call a master reset, where we take 2 electrodes and put them kind of at your hairline, if you have a hairline. For some of us, you can go a little bit higher, but at the base of your skull, basically, top of your neck, and then the other one's on the balls of your feet, and lie down at a table or a bed in a quiet room, and for 20 minutes, kind of meditate or focus on your breathing, and then we turn that up to where it's a comfortable level, but a strong current going through there. What we're doing is we're stimulating the vagus nerve that comes through there, and the vagus nerve is the nerve that's primarily responsible for our fight or flight sympathetic nervous system, because it goes from the brain and then it innervates a lot of our internal organs and things, our heart deals with heart rate and digestive system and things like that.
Is there any risk to this? Like, is there any that you're aware of, at least, as far as like you can't harm it by doing this?
Yeah. Through the training, and actually something came up a couple weeks ago, and so I reached out to the team, my teachers, mentors, whatever, the people at NewFit, and ask some questions, because there's really no contraindications other than cancer, active cancer. You wouldn't treat over that area. And they say pregnancies. And that's what I asked about, is like I was treating a young woman who was not pregnant, but said that her and her husband were, talking about starting a family, and she was wondering, like, is there any risk there? And the on the record answer is, well, we don't treat pregnant women. And the off the record answer is that we don't see any reason for alarm with treating someone who's pregnant. There's been no evidence there is, but we just didn't do any studies on it.
Yeah.
Because
it's just like added risk. If there's no research, you don't know for sure.
Yeah. It's like, who's going to volunteer that with my healthy baby, that I'm going to do a study that could do something? But the woman, it says, like, we've treated people, on the staff while they're pregnant and no problems. And she says, and if I was pregnant, I would be doing that every day.
Yeah.
So
that's funny.
So I don't think there really is, but
but it's like new technology, limited studies have to be risk adverse from that perspective. That totally makes sense. Well, I find this to be fascinating. I want to try it personally. So we were talking before we were recording. I'm going to go down and give it a shot. And it's funny, as you were talking, what did you call it? A super reset?
Master reset.
Master reset. I'm picturing like when you restart your phone, but you hold both the buttons instead of just the one. That's like what I was picturing as you were talking. I was like, I need a Control-Alt-Delete for my brain.
Yeah. I mean, this can conversation. We could probably talk for hours and hours, and go a lot of different routes, but a big theme, and I know it's important for you is, with health and stuff like that, is we've not figured out our healthcare system for sure.
Oh, no, yeah.
And the frustrating part, it being a private practice. So, you said at the beginning, it's like, well, you have something that nobody else has. Well, there's only 1,000 of these units around the country. So
I was going to ask that.
So yeah. I'm an early adopter. The first one went into a clinic. The very first one that they tried out in a clinic was in the end of 2018. So now they're up to 1,000 and some across the country. And of course, I told you the MS Gym does have them, but they're not a physical therapy clinic. As far as I know, there's none others in Southeast Wisconsin. I know of someone, actually was a intern of mine who was gifted one, and he's in Madison.
Wow, nice gift.
Yeah, it was a great gift. And then I know there's some like up in the Waukesha area. So those are the only ones in Wisconsin that I know. But it's hard, like I said, the marketing part and trying to get the word out and stuff. But when I learned about the neuropathy thing, I'm like, well, we want to help people with this. So I looked online. I found near me someplace that treated, diabetics and neuropathy. So I looked that up, and I found a nurse practitioner who will remain nameless. But I will say she worked for Pro Health System. And it doesn't really matter that it's Pro Health. It's just that they were really close to where my clinic is. Mm-hmm. And I called and said, listen, I said, I know you treat people with neuropathy because you'd advertise it. And, and want to talk to me. And she said, I'm uncomfortable talking about that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she didn't really have an answer. I said, well, what do you do for neuropathy? She goes, so again, I'm not comfortable talking. I said, okay, let's just face it. You treat them with drugs that don't work, and you might send them to therapy for TENS or something, but also doesn't work. And then eventually you just tell them they have to cope with it and learn to cope. And there's support groups and stuff. I'm telling you that there's something I'm the only one around here that treats it. Just send me a client or two. And she's like, well, I would have to go to my medical director to be able to refer someone out because we have PT here. I said, yes, you have PT here, but you don't have
this. It's a totally different value proposition. Yeah.
And it was so frustrating. And I said, okay, I'm doing a workshop on it. It's a free workshop. Maybe you could just, tell some people, check it out. So I sent her the information, and I followed up for 2 or 3 times, and I've never heard back. Mm-hmm. So I talked to her on the phone the one time, and then emails and never heard back. And it's frustrating because she was like this, right?
Yeah.
She might have wanted to help, but she was handcuffed.
I was going to say, it's where the bureaucracy gets in the way of the health benefit to the, I was going to say like consumer or client, but just person, the human being that they're treating, patient. Yeah.
I did a clinic on a workshop on the neuropathy, and one lady that came says, well, aren't you going to tell other people? I said, I'm telling people about it. She's like, no. She's like, do you tell other PTs about it? I'm like, sure, I'm happy to tell them.
Yeah.
But I feel like you should be doing more. I said, what am I going to do? I'm doing it. I'm offering it to you.
Yeah.
And I'm telling. But it's funny because then she said, well, why wouldn't they use it then at some of these bigger health systems? I'm like, well, the problem is I paid, like I said, close to $20,000 for this, but I can only treat 1 or 2 people at a time with it.
Yeah.
So if you get this huge clinic, they're not going to invest that kind of money. In it.
Well, also it's emerging tech. It took a lot of learning in terms of how to use it, what to use it for. It'd be kind of like going back to any business in 1989 and being like, why don't you use computers yet?
Yeah.
It's like, well, because it's new and it's not exactly easy to integrate. Yeah. So I'm sure at some point it'll become more common practice, but the reality is today it's not. And by then you're the type of forward-looking person that there'll probably be something else then that we're using, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It just continues. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, there's all kinds of neat stuff out there. And the things that we're learning about the mind and the brain and the body and stuff, there's just, and we were talking before, there's also a lot of grifters, a lot of people selling something that's, but I think you just have to go out and research it and try it and see, if people are really trying to help you, they're going to give you the information and they're going to let you try it and stuff like that. If they're just asking for a big check up front, then that's probably not where you want to go.
Yeah. Matt's not selling a course on Instagram. Yeah. No, that's funny. No, that's awesome. I mean, like I said, I cannot wait to try it. So what we should do is I'll get in there to try it, and then we have to do a follow-up on how it went, and I'll give an honest review of how it went. Absolutely.
Well, we got to decide whether we're going to attack the foot first or your stress.
The stress, probably.
I think the stress is the one that we need to do.
Yeah. I think the stress would be more beneficial to my life, definitely, but the foot would maybe be more beneficial to you guys. So whichever is fine with me. It's both positive.
the master reset, I want some people. The problem is people might feel a difference, after a session or two, but it's hard to quantify. So when I saw that you had the Aura Ring, I'm like, hey, you can be a guinea pig. I can try that because the Aura Ring will give you feedback and information that shows a change.
Yeah, because in theory, my heart rate variability should improve as the stress goes down, right? Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that sounds awesome. I'd love to do that. Before we get out of here, anything else that you want to cover or talk about or plug? Now we can do the ads portion of the show.
Portion.
Yeah.
So, well, if this has been interesting to anyone out there, or they know somebody that they might benefit from it, you just want to learn more, or maybe come and get a free brat. We are doing a client appreciation day on May 17th. It's a Saturday, and just going to open up the clinic. You can come in and see all the different things we do there. Like I say, we're physical therapists, but we do things like the newbie. I'll probably give a 30-minute talk. I haven't set the agenda yet, but a little bit about neuroscience of pain and how the newbie works. But we'll do demonstrations. You also can see the laser. We have nutrition consulting that we do through there. I have 2 gals that are certified consultants, and they work on that. Have a fitness trainer, Coach B, and hopefully he'll be there to kind of talk about what we do from fitness standpoint there. And then we have different things that we offer and sell, and do some big specials like that. Probably do a giveaway of something significant, but I haven't named that yet. So yeah, just way to come out, see the clinic, see how we're probably different than maybe other therapy places that you maybe seen in the past. But yeah.
Absolutely. And that's it'll be hosted at your location in Waukesha, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Fyzical in Waukesha.
Yeah, right next to Point Burger Bar. People, I can plug Point Burger Bar. They're my neighbor there,
There's been a lot of free ads in this episode. I need to start getting people to cut checks. I don't know.
I was like, yeah, you just throw their logos up afterwards and stuff.
Exactly. And then send them an invoice. That's right. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Everything costs something. This is opportunity cost.